Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is Thursday, February 12, 2026. If you are listening to this, you have successfully navigated the first month of the year, although successfully might be a bit of a relative term given what we're about to talk about.
Survived might be the better word. It has been a blistering start to 2026 already.
It really has. And because the noise-to-signal ratio is frankly off the charts right now, we're shifting gears a little for this deep dive. We're going to adopt what we're calling the Watchpost security stance.
Right.
We know who's listening to this.
Yeah.
You aren't here for the fluff pieces or the cybersecurity 101 primers. You're the CISOs, the SOC analysts, the threat hunters, the researchers who are actually...
Well, you're the ones manning the walls.
Exactly. You need the red alerts. You need to know what is actively on fire right now, not what might be some, theoretical problem in 6 months. Precisely. So our mission for the next hour is to filter out all that marketing noise and focus strictly, and I mean strictly, on the critical cyber events from the last 29 days. We're looking at that window leading right up to today, February 12th.
And when you do that, when you scrib the logs that way, two things just jump right out. Two massive, almost contradictory pillars.
It really is a study in contrasts, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. On one hand, you have a technical vulnerability that feels like it belongs in a computer history museum. I mean, a ghost from the past discovered just days ago on January 27th in a protocol that, frankly, should have been depreciated before I was born.
Telnet.
Telnet,
Yeah.
all things. And then, on the other hand, we have the definitive report card for the absolute unmitigated chaos that was the year 2025.
And that report, which dropped on January 29th, it fundamentally changes how we have to understand the economics of supply chain risk.
It really does. So you have this micro-technical failure in ancient legacy code, and at the exact same time, a macro-systemic failure in our modern business structure.
It feels like we're fighting a war on two fronts. We've got the technical debt from the 1980s and the transparency debt from the 2020s,
Yeah.
and they're both coming at us at the same time.
That is the perfect way to frame it. That is the theme of this deep dive. Hidden debts.
Yeah.
We're finally paying the interest on old code we forgot to delete, and we are absolutely paying the interest on corporate structures we failed to regulate. And in January 2026, the bill came due.
So let's start with the immediate fire, the technical debt. Section 1, the ghost bug.
Let's get into the weeds.
Okay, so take us back to January 27, 2026. The Health ISI, that's the Health Information Sharing and Analysis Center, they issue a critical threat bulletin.
Right.
Now, usually when I see Health ISI alert, I'm bracing myself. I'm thinking, okay, a new variant of Black Hat ransomware, or maybe some sophisticated social engineering campaign targeting hospital payroll. But this was different. This was CDE 2026-24061.
A critical vulnerability in Telnet.
I have to be honest, when I saw Telnet in the subject line of a 2026 threat bulletin, I literally checked the date header. I thought I was looking at an archive from, 1998.
I did the same thing.
We all know Telnet is insecure. It sends credentials in clear text. We have SSH. It's been the standard for decades. Why on earth are we even talking about this in 2026?
Because it is still running. That is the deeply uncomfortable truth. We can stand on our soapboxes and lecture about SSH keys all day, but the reality of the install base is, well, it's messy.
Clearly.
But this isn't just about the protocol being insecure by its very design, which of course it is. This is a very specific, very nasty remote code execution and authentication bypass vulnerability. It's in the GNU and Noodles package.
Okay, let's clarify that distinction, because that's important. We're not just talking about the Telnet client that might be on, say, a Cisco switch or a Windows server. What exactly is GNU and Noodles?
So, GNU and Noodles is a collection of common network programs, clients and daemons for things like FTP, Telnet, hard login, all the classics. It's a standard package on many, many Linux distributions.
Okay.
And it is particularly common in the embedded world. So you need to be thinking about stripped-down Linux kernels running on industrial controllers, IoT devices, or, and this is the key here, legacy medical equipment. They often use internals to provide just that basic level of connectivity.
So this is code that's sitting deep inside the firmware of these black box devices that nobody ever touches.
Exactly. And the vulnerability score, the CVSS score, it really reflects the severity. It has a score of 9.8 out of 10.
A 9.8, which is effectively the everything is on fire, run for the hills score.
It is. It's as bad as it gets. A 9.8 vector means a few things. First, it's network accessible, so you can hit it from anywhere remotely. Second, low attack complexity. You don't need to win some crazy race condition or predict memory offsets.
Easy.
It's push button easy. And most critically, the third part. Privileges required is none.
You don't need a username. You don't need a password. You don't need anything.
You just need a TCP connection to the open port. That's it. You're in.
Now, the bulletin from Health ISAC refers to this as an authentication bypass. But when I was looking at the technical write-up by the researcher who found this, Q Nuswestein, who reported it back on January 19th, it looks much more like a fundamental logic error than a traditional bypass.
It is absolutely a logic error. It's a parsing failure. It's embarrassingly simple when you break it down.
So walk us through it.
It all comes down to how Telnet handles the very first handshake. When your client connects to the server, there's this negotiation phase where they agree on environment variables.
Right, like telling the server things like, hey, I'm using this terminal type, or my username is X. Standard stuff.
Exactly. And one of those variables you can pass is the USR variable. Now, in any sane, secure system, the daemon takes that variable, it sanitizes it to make sure it only contains valid characters like a username, and then it passes it to the login process.
But not in this version of genuine utils.
In Intutils, specifically this vulnerable version of the Telnet that's packaged there, it just failed. It completely failed to properly sanitize that input before passing it along to the underlying login executable.
And that's the whole game right there.
That's the whole game. It allowed the injection of command line arguments.
And this is where the so-called magic words come in. The exploit isn't some, complex buffer overflow string with a bunch of shellcode. It's just a command line argument.
It's terrifyingly simple. The attacker just injects the argument -root.
--root. That's it.
That's it. The DAF flag is actually a legitimate, though obscure, argument for the login binary itself. It stands for force, or sometimes you'll see it as pre-authenticated.
And what does that do?
It tells the login program, hey, trust me, this user has already been authenticated by whatever process called me. Do not, under any circumstances, prompt for a password. Just let them in.
And that flag exists for, internal system processes like login or something from back in the day?
Correct. It was never, ever intended to be triggered by an external, untrusted user connecting over the network. But because Telnet just blindly takes the argument from that USER environment variable and stitches it into the execution string for login.
And the attacker essentially gets to say, hi, I'm the user, and oh, by the way, I've already logged in as root.
And the login binary, being a dutiful little program, sees that live flag and just drops them straight into a shell.
Not just any shell.
A root shell. Game over. Complete system compromise in a single packet.
It's almost funny if it weren't so incredibly dangerous. It really is like walking up to a bouncer at some exclusive club. Usually he checks your ID against the guest list.
Right.
But instead, you just hand him a little handwritten note that says, the manager says I'm already inside, and the bouncer just believes the note and opens the velvet rope.
That is a fair analogy. I'd even add that the bouncer isn't even looking at you. He's just reading the note. The system's own logic is completely short-circuited.
And the fact that this bug, this flaw, has existed in the code for 11 years is the really chilling part. The ghost aspect.
11 years. Since at least 2015.
Unbelievable.
It has been sitting there in open source code, readable by absolutely anyone, for over a decade. We have this mantra in open source that many eyes make all bugs shallow.
But clearly, nobody had eyes on Telnet.
Nobody was looking. We all just assumed it was dead. We assumed it was obsolete, so why bother auditing it?
It was security through obsolescence.
Yeah.
We figured it was too old and creaky for anyone to find a new way to break it.
And that assumption is now being actively weaponized. The Health ISAC Bulletin is very clear on this. It confirms active exploitation in the wild. This is not a theoretical exercise. Threat actors are scanning for this right now as we speak.
They even mentioned a specific group.
Yeah.
RWXRWX.
Yes, which is a pretty cheeky reference to the COM777 command in Linux, full read, write, and execute permissions for everyone.
But not a subtle group.
None at all. It seems to be a group that specializes in this kind of low-hanging fruit. They're not burning sophisticated 0 days. They're just taking what's freely available. And the intelligence says they are scanning the entire IPv4 space for open ports 23 and 2323.
And I saw that there's already a script circulating to automate this, right?
Oh, yeah. There's a Python script that's been making the rounds on the usual dark web forums, and it's even popped up on some clear web repositories before they get taken down.
And what does it do?
It's completely automated. You just feed it a list of IP addresses or a network range, and it goes out and tries the -root injection on every single one. If it gets a root shell, it reports back. Simple as that.
So the barrier to entry for an attacker is literally 0. You don't need to understand the memory stack or assembly. You just need to know how to run a Python script.
Exactly. It is script kiddie level difficulty with nation-state level impact. That's what makes it so dangerous.
Once they get that root shell, what's the typical payload? Are they just looking around or are they moving fast?
No, they are moving very, very fast. According to the threat intel, the first thing they do is establish persistence immediately.
Oh.
They're dropping reverse shells, which, connect back out to a command and control server they control, and they're usually doing it on a high, non-standard port to try and bypass basic egress filtering at the firewall.
So even if the admin patches the Telnet bug tomorrow, the attackers still have a backdoor into the system.
Precisely. They're also doing things like adding their own SSH public keys to the authorized keys file for the root user, so they're effectively locking the door behind them and keeping a copy of the key. And then, once persistence is established, they pivot.
And this brings us right back to the industry focus. Why did Health ISAC issue this alert? Why is this being framed as a healthcare crisis specifically?
This connects directly to the hardware lifecycle we touched on earlier. If you go into a modern hospital, yeah, the doctors are using iPads, the administrative staff are on brand new Windows 11 machines. But the biomedical layer, the operational technology, or OT, that is a time capsule.
We're talking about the actual medical devices. MRI machines, CT scanners, infusion pumps.
Automated pharmacy dispensers, pneumatic tube system controllers, patient monitoring stations. These are devices that cost hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars each. They are purchased with a capital depreciation schedule of 15 to 20 years.
Right. You don't just throw away a perfectly good MRI machine that costs $2 million just because the Linux kernel it's running is a little old.
Exactly. So what you have is a machine that was maybe manufactured in 2012, running a Linux kernel from 2009. It uses Intoodles for its internal networking and diagnostic stack. And this is the absolutely crucial part. The manufacturer very likely enabled Telnet for factory diagnostics and then just never disabled it in the production firmware.
It's a zombie service, left on by default and forgotten.
It is a zombie service running inside a locked black box. The hospital's own IT staff can't just easily log into the MRI machine and check the configuration files or disable a service.
Why not?
Doing so might void the multi-million-dollar warranty, or even worse, it could violate the FDA's certification of the device as a medical instrument. You can't tamper with it.
So the hospital CISO is basically sitting on a powder keg. They have potentially hundreds of devices that might be vulnerable, they can't easily patch them, and they definitely can't afford to replace them.
And the attackers know this. They know these environments are soft targets. The nightmare scenario here isn't necessarily that they're going to shut off the MRI machine, though to be clear, they absolutely could. The real nightmare is that they use the MRI machine as a jump box.
Lateral movement.
That's the name of the game. The MRI machine is on the internal hospital network. The attacker uses this Telnet exploit to get root on the scanner. From the scanner, which is now a trusted internal device, they launch attacks against the domain controllers, the file servers, the electronic health records database.
So the scanner is just the beachhead. It's the point of entry.
It is the open window in the basement that lets them get inside and eventually rob the master bedroom on the second floor.
So let's talk mitigation. For the people listening, for that hospital CISO, what do you actually do today? The bulletin suggests a framework: kill, clean, or jail.
It's a good framework. It covers the bases, but the execution of each of those steps is, well, it's painful.
Let's start with kill it. That's the most obvious one. Just disable Telnet.
Right. If you can. If you have root access to the device's operating system, then yes, it's a simple system teltel stop telnet, system disable telnet. But, as we just said, many of these are proprietary appliances. You might not have the shell access you need to do that. The vendor might have locked you out.
Okay, so if you can't kill it, you move to clean it. Patching.
Which means you need to update GNU and NetUtils to version 2.7-2 or higher. Again, this is great if you control the OS. It's practically impossible if you're waiting for a vendor like GE or Siemens or Philips to release a validated firmware update for a 10-year-old product.
That could take months, if it ever happens at all.
Exactly. They might just declare it end of life and tell you to buy a new machine.
Which leaves the last option: jail it.
Network segmentation. Honestly, for the immediate term, this is the only realistic, scalable solution. You have to start from the assumption that these devices are hostile and cannot be trusted.
What does that look like in practice?
You put them in their own dedicated VLAN, a virtual network just for them. And then you apply extremely strict access control lists or ACLs at the firewall or router.
A default deny posture.
Absolutely. The MRI machine should only be allowed to talk to the specific PASS server it needs to send images to, and nothing else. It should not be able to talk to the internet. It should not be able to talk to the finance department server. It needs to be in a digital padded cell.
It sounds simple when you say it like that, but segmenting a live hospital network without disrupting patient care is, well, it's a massive undertaking.
It is. It is the network equivalent of performing open heart surgery on the network while the patient is still awake. It's fraught with risk. But the alternative is a full-blown ransomware event that shuts down the entire hospital for weeks.
And we know exactly what that looks like, which is actually the perfect, if grim, segue to our second pillar for today.
The autopsy of 2025.
On January 29, 2026, just 2 days after that Telnet alert, the Privacy Rights Clearinghouse released their 2025 data breach report. So now we're moving from the micro view, the specific technical exploit, to the macro view, the aggregate damage.
And the damage it's just staggering. The key thing to remember about this report is that we aren't relying on, news headlines or corporate press releases. This report aggregates the actual legal notification filings that companies are required to submit to state and federal agencies. This is the legal record of what happened.
So let's hit those headline numbers. Give us the scale of it.
Okay. The report compiled 8,019 separate filings. That represents 4,080 unique breach events. And then the number that honestly keeps me up at night, 375 million individuals affected.
Let's just pause on that. 375 million. To put that in perspective for everyone listening, the entire population of the United States is roughly 345 million people.
So statistically speaking, every single person in the country was breached last year. In reality, of course, many, many people were breached 2, 3, or even more times in different incidents.
And within that huge number, there's one single event that just completely distorts the entire data set. It's the elephant in the room.
It's Change Healthcare.
We all lived through the chaos of that attack, but seeing the final numbers laid out in black and white in this report it's still staggering.
It really is. And for me, the timeline is what's truly shocking. Remember, the attack itself happened way back in early 2024. The final breach notification, the one where they finally admitted the full total count, didn't come until October of 2025.
Wait, that's a 20-month lag.
20 months.
Nearly 2 years between the attack and the final admission of scale. And that final count was 192.7 million people.
That is officially the largest healthcare breach in history. And not just by a little bit, it's by a massive margin. The previous record holder was the Anthem breach, way back in 2015, which affected about 80 million people. That was the record for a decade. Change Healthcare more than doubled it. It fundamentally broke the scale of how we even measure these things.
But the report makes a really important point. It says even if you delete Change Healthcare from the spreadsheet entirely, 2025 was still a complete and utter disaster.
It was. And for me, the most interesting and damning finding in the whole report was the analysis of vendor risk.
They call it the supply chain domino effect.
Exactly. We tend to think, I bank with Chase, so I trust Chase to protect my data, or I go to this local hospital, they have my records, they're responsible. But the report shows that 8 of the 20 largest breaches in 2025 didn't happen at the company you think you do business with. They happened at their service providers.
The companies behind the curtain, the ones you've never heard of.
And get this. Those 8 breaches at service providers, by themselves, accounted for 231 million affected people. That is over 60% of the total victims for the entire year.
Let's name some of these names, because I guarantee most of our listeners have never heard of half of them.
Okay, everyone knows Change Healthcare now, unfortunately. But what about a company called Episource? They lost 6.6 million records. What about a company called 700 Credit?
I have to admit, I had never heard of 700 Credit until I read this report.
And they lost 5.8 million records. These are the data aggregators, the payment processors, the medical transcription services, the background check firms. They are the nth party in the supply chain.
Wait, you didn't give your data to them directly?
Never. You gave it to a car dealership to get a loan. The dealership gave it to the bank. The bank used 700 Credit to pull your credit history. And that's who got breached.
It's the invisibility of it that's the real problem. You can't choose to boycott a company you don't even know has your data.
And you certainly can't vet their security practices. As a consumer, you have zero agency in this whole invisible web. And even as a business, vetting your fourth-party vendors is notoriously almost impossibly difficult.
The report also digs into the sector breakdown. And coming right off our discussion about the Telnet bug, the results are, well, they're not surprising at all.
Healthcare is the bullseye. It is ground zero. The sector accounted for 66% of all affected individuals in 2025. Two-thirds of all victims came from healthcare-related breaches.
Why is it always healthcare? Is it purely the legacy tech problem we just talked about?
That's a huge part of it, but I think it's more of a perfect storm triangle. One corner is high-value data. Medical records sell for way more on the dark web than credit card numbers.
Because they're permanent.
Exactly. They contain unchangeable, personally identifiable information. Your date of birth, your social security number, your mother's maiden name, your entire medical history. You can cancel a credit card in 5 minutes. You can't cancel a diabetes diagnosis.
Okay, so high-value data is one corner. What's the second?
The second is the legacy tech we just spent 10 minutes on, a massive, brittle, unpatchable attack surface. And the third corner is criticality.
Meaning?
If a ransomware gang hits a shoe store, the store closes for a week. It's an inconvenience. Who cares? If they hit a hospital and lock up the patient record system, people die. The pressure to pay the ransom is existential.
It's predatory. They're targeting the most vulnerable institutions because they know they're most likely to pay.
It is predatory in the truest sense of the word. The report lists other major hits beyond Change. Yale New Haven Health, Blue Shield of California. But it also wasn't just private industry. Government entities were hit too. The U.S. Department of Treasury had a breach affecting 2.4 million people.
If the Treasury Department can't secure its data, what hope does a small regional dental group or a dialysis provider have?
Very, very little. And that's the grim reality the report paints.
I want to move on to Section 3 of our deep dive because the report pivots here. It moves from just counting the bodies to analyzing why we are failing so badly at transparency. They identify what they call a massive transparency gap.
This, to me, is the most frustrating part of the whole thing, especially for researchers. You look at that number, 8,000 filings, and you think, wow, that should be a treasure trove of data on attack vectors. We should be able to say with confidence, okay, 40% of breaches were caused by phishing, 20% by unpatched vulnerabilities like this Telnet one, 10% by SQL injection.
But we can't do that.
We can't even come close. The report found that in cases where the actual consumer notification letters were available for public review, only 17% mentioned a specific attack method.
17%. 1/7. That means in 83% of cases, the company just says something generic like, oops, unauthorized access to our systems occurred.
They used the official classification, UNKN, unknown.
Now, let me play devil's advocate for a second. Is it possible that in some of these cases, they truly just don't know how they were hacked?
In the first 48 hours after discovery, sure, that's plausible. But these notification letters are going out months after the fact. By then, a forensic investigation is usually complete. This isn't a lack of knowledge. This is a deliberate legal strategy.
This is the company's general counsel stepping in front of the CISO and telling them what to write.
Exactly. I have been in these rooms. The security team wants to be transparent. They want to share the indicators of compromise, the IOCs, to help the rest of the community to defend itself. And the lawyers step in and say, absolutely not.
Why? What's the legal reasoning there?
It's all about liability. If your notification letter says, we were breached because we failed to patch CVE 2026-24061 for 6 months, you are openly admitting negligence. You have just written the opening statement for the plaintiffs in the inevitable class action lawsuit.
Whereas if you say, we were the unfortunate victim of a highly sophisticated state-sponsored cyber attack,
you paint yourself as a fellow victim of a crime. It shifts the blame, so vagueness becomes a defense mechanism.
vagueness is a legal shield.
It's a shield that hurts the entire herd. If we don't know how these attacks are succeeding, we can't prioritize our defenses effectively. The corporate silence is making all of us less secure.
And the report points out that the state agencies themselves are often complicit in this lack of transparency.
Yes. This was a really interesting finding. More than half of all the breach filings in 2025 came from states that don't publish the full notification letter online. They only publish a summary data sheet. So even if the company did write a detailed letter to the consumer, researchers and the public can't see it.
It's a systemic failure of information sharing, from top to bottom. And that brings us to the timeline again. The report identified this huge problem of notification lag.
This is the part that should make every consumer angry. They found that the most common window for a company to finally notify you that your data was stolen is 91 to 180 days.
3 to 6 months.
Just let that sink in. Your personal information is stolen in January. The bad guys are selling your identity on a forum in February. They're opening fraudulent credit cards in your name in March. You don't get the letter in the mail until June.
By June, the damage is already done. Your credit is wrecked. Fraudulent loans have been taken out. It's too late.
Precisely. The notification at that point is effectively useless as a preventative measure. It's just an autopsy report for your financial identity.
But wait a minute, what about all these state laws? I thought California passed SB 446. There are laws on the books now mandating, what, 30-day notification?
There are, and California's SB 446 is considered the gold standard right now. But the report crunched the numbers and found that less than 10% of the breaches that occurred in 2025 would have met that strict 30-day standard.
So 90% of companies are just not compliant.
Or they're using loopholes. They're waiting for the regulators to actually grow teeth and drop the hammer with massive fines. Until the fines for being late exceed the perceived risk of the class action lawsuit, the lawyers will always advise delay. They'll just keep telling the regulator, our investigation is ongoing, to pause the clock indefinitely.
It really sounds like the entire regulatory framework is toothless.
It's lagging behind the reality of the threat. But there is an interesting shift happening, and the report alludes to it in its research section. It seems the financial markets are finally starting to care about this.
How so? Tell me about this economic modeling research they mentioned.
So the Privacy Rights Clearinghouse, the group that wrote the report, they also make their anonymized data set available to academic researchers. They granted 63 research requests in 2025, and a lot of these are now coming from economists and business schools, not just computer scientists.
And what are they studying?
They're modeling data breaches as a contagion effect, like a financial virus.
The contagion.
Exactly. They're mapping how a breach at a key supply chain vendor, like 700 Credit, infects all of its downstream clients, and how that risk propagates through an entire economic sector. But even more importantly, they're starting to correlate breach data with ESG scores.
ESG, environmental, social, and governance. So they're focused on the G.
Right. Big institutional investors are starting to ask a fundamental question. Is a company's cyber hygiene a reliable proxy for its overall quality of governance? If a CEO is allowing unpatched Telnet servers from 1985 to run on their network, are they also cutting corners on their financial accounting or their environmental compliance?
That is a fascinating angle, because if Wall Street decides that a data breach is a clear sign of incompetent leadership, the hit to the stock price will be far more painful than any regulatory fine.
That is the hope. The hope is that market forces, activist investors, short sellers, huge pension funds will start to force the transparency that the law has so far failed to. If a fund like BlackRock calls up a CEO and says, patch your systems, improve it, or we divest, believe me, things will happen very, very fast.
Money talks.
Louder than anything else.
So we have the ghost bug, this immediate burning technical threat, and we have the breach report, this lagging, strategic, systemic failure. Let's move to section 4 now. Synthesis. How do we connect these two pillars for everyone listening?
The connection is what I call the life cycle of failure. It's a predictable chain of events.
Okay, walk me through that life cycle.
Look at the components. The Telnet vulnerability, our ghost bug, is a classic entry vector. It is how attackers get their initial foothold. And as we discussed, it's a prime vector for ransomware gangs to get into these soft OT and healthcare environments.
Right. Step 1 is the vulnerability.
Step 1. Now look at the breach report. What was the single biggest event of 2025? Change Healthcare. What kind of attack was that? A ransomware attack on the healthcare supply chain.
So the ghost bug is the mechanism, and the breach report is the inevitable result.
Exactly. We are looking at cause and effect, just separated by about 12 to 18 months of time. The unpatched vulnerability of today becomes the multi-million record data breach of tomorrow.
And the notification light we talk about is the dark period in between, where the victims are completely unaware and unprotected.
Correct. So the full cycle is this. Step 1, you have neglected legacy tech, like our Telnet bug. That leads to step 2, exploitation by a group like RWX. That enables step 3, lateral movement and the deployment of ransomware. That causes step 4, the breach itself. And then you have step 5, 6 months of corporate silence. And finally, step 6, the notification letter arrives in your mailbox.
So the entire point of what we're doing here, the Watchpost security mission, is to intervene at step 1.
That is the whole point.
Yeah.
If you hunt down and kill that Telnet bug on your network today, you break the chain of failure before it ever gets to the ransomware stage, let alone the notification letter stage.
Okay, so let's give our listeners the so what. We have a pretty diverse audience.
Yeah.
Let's break down the key takeaways by their role. Let's start with the tactical. You're a system admin or a network engineer listening to this on your commute into the office.
If you are tactical, your mission for today is crystal clear. Hunt for Telnet. Do not trust your asset inventory. Do not assume it's accurate. Fire up Nmap or your vulnerability scanner of choice and scan your subnets. Specifically, scan your OT, your IOMT, and your lab equipment VLANs.
And if you find port 23 or 2323 open,
You treat it as a critical active incident. Do not just file a low priority ticket, escalate it, investigate what that device is. If you can disable the service without breaking something, do it immediately. If you can't, you move to jail it. Segment it off the network right now. And then go verify your logs. Grep your syslog for the string login and the flag. See if anyone has already tried to knock on this door.
okay, that's tactical. Now let's move up to strategic. You're a CISO, a CFO, or a director of risk management.
For you, the takeaway is that you need to take a long, hard look at your vendor risk management program. The 2025 report proves, with data, that 60% of your breach risk is outside your own building. You have to stop accepting those generic, check-the-box security questionnaires from your vendors.
What should they be asking for instead?
Get specific. Ask for their SBOM, their software bill of materials. Ask them to attest specifically to their legacy systems management policy. Ask them in writing. Do you have any products in your environment running GNU and Noodles? If so, what is your patch deployment timeline for CVE 2026-24061? If they can't or won't answer that question, that is a massive red flag.
And then finally, let's bring it all the way home. The personal takeaway. For every listener, just as a human being with a bank account and a social security number,
This is the hard pill to swallow. You have to operate from this day forward under the default assumption that your sensitive personal data is already compromised and for sale.
the assume breach mentality. But for your personal life,
Yes. 375 million victims in a single year. The math is not in your favor. You are almost certainly one of them. And because of that 180-day notification lag, you cannot afford to wait for the letter to arrive.
so what do we do? What are the actionable steps?
You have to adopt a defensive posture for your own identity. The number one thing you can do is freeze your credit at all three major bureaus. That's Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Go to their websites and do it today. It's free by law, and it is the single most effective way to stop criminals from opening new lines of credit in your name.
What about passwords and authentication?
You absolutely must use a unique, complex password for every single online account, which means you must use a password manager. There's no other way to do it. And you must enable multi-factor authentication, or MFA, everywhere that it is offered. And I don't mean just SMS text messages. Those can be hijacked through SIM swapping. Use a proper authenticator app on your phone, or even better, a physical hardware security key like a YubiKey.
So essentially, you have to become the CISO of your own life.
You have to build your own castle walls because the 2025 report makes it painfully clear that the companies you've entrusted with your data have failed to build theirs.
It is a sobering reality. But I suppose that's why we do this deep dive, to know the terrain, no matter how grim it is.
Ignorance is not bliss in cybersecurity. Ignorance is just unmanaged risk.
Before we sign off, I want to leave everyone with one final, slightly provocative thought that's been bugging me since I read this report. I was digging through the methodology section.
Ah, the fine print.
Always read the fine print. And they mentioned a small, almost throwaway detail. They are now using AI and large language models to process all the incoming breach notification letters.
Why? What's the reason?
Because the volume is just too high. There are too many letters, too many different PDF formats, too many filings coming in from 50 different states for their human researchers to read and categorize manually anymore. They had to automate the process of counting the failures.
That is a profound and depressing irony.
It really is. So here's the question that raises for me. If we have reached the point as an industry where we need to deploy artificial intelligence just to keep score of how many times we fail to protect data, have we crossed a sort of philosophical tipping point?
You mean, have we implicitly accepted defeat?
Exactly. Are data breaches now just another cost of doing business, like product spoilage in a grocery store or shoplifting in retail? Is it just a line item on the profit and loss statement rather than an existential crisis we actually believe we can solve?
That's a really disturbing thought. It suggests that the market has effectively priced in the complete loss of consumer privacy. That we're not even trying to fix the hull of the ship anymore. We're just buying bigger and more efficient buckets to bail out the water.
And if you connect that thought back to the Telnet bug, if we cannot even summon the collective will to kill a completely insecure protocol from the 1970s, a protocol older than the commercial internet itself, what hope do we genuinely have of securing the autonomous AI agents of the 2030s?
We are building these incredible, complex skyscrapers on a foundation of crumbling brick and rotten wood. And then we act surprised every time the windows crack.
We're just managing to decline. That seems to be the overarching lesson of January 2026.
It's a harsh lesson. But maybe, just maybe, if enough people listen to these red alerts and take action, we can start to actually reinforce that foundation brick by brick.
That has to be the hope. Thank you for breaking all of this down. It was heavy, but absolutely necessary.
Always a pleasure to be here.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deeper and, yes, darker dive. Remember the Watchpost mission. Stay curious, pad your legacy boxes, and seriously, go check for Telnet right now. And please, go freeze your credit.
Do it right now before you even listen to another podcast.
We will see you next time. Stay safe out there.